Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of video game news. Today is Friday, September 20th. We had a better retention time last stream, so perhaps I should hop directly into the news once again and not go into incredible rambliness at the very beginning of all these streams, as I may be accused of doing right now. Still getting the daily login rewards from Yu-Gi-Oh! While not really getting anything else. New terms of use agreement, apparently. And I'll leave it at that. So, I am still... Well, you can see Black Myth Wukong here is down to the 4th position. I'm still working on my new version of the macro to open all this news. I'm getting very close to it working, although I'm hoping it is worth all the effort, certainly, for, well, it's not even really effort as much as time. As I started a new project just to get more project debt effectively. People are playing Satisfactory. I'm having a thought, certainly, that I could see myself playing Satisfactory, but I could also see myself finding it fairly boring and repetitive. It kind of starts off, it looks like Satisfactory starts off very early, like a Minecraft game, and then very quickly becomes more of a automation game where it's just numbers on numbers on numbers, building factories bigger and bigger. To a point where you very well might, at the end game, have lost the plot of anything that's actually fun or even that interactive. So I'm cautiously optimistic that I might want to play it. It's kind of funny to see Team Fortress 2 so low. So yeah, I've been working on my macro to open the news a little bit, made some decent progress, but haven't finished it. Otherwise, I guess I'm in this weird position where I may get interrupted a little less often going forward, but I'm still going to get interrupted enough. I still haven't scheduled any videos, which I totally need to do. I've been watching a lot of a Hulu series called Shorzy, which is a dirty player hockey comedy. A comedy about a dirty hockey player in hockey team, to the point where they kind of completely skip over any of the actual hockey and are more just glamorizing the fighting and the poop talking, which is where I think I can relate a lot to it, comparing that to something like the League, which I finished watching the League, and it stands up less and less every time I watch it, and it's just not, it doesn't really have a good consistent through line to it and a good polish to it. It's still a show I like, but I just would say you probably can only watch it once a decade at most before you start to breed contempt around it. So yeah, I'm not playing any games other than playing the Cardcaptor Sakura mobile game, which is just awful. They really are just ruining the good parts of Cardcaptor Sakura by putting in a massive amount of monetization, and they're just updating it more and more to try and trick people into spending money, and it's just like that. This is not what you do with a series that is so beloved, although unfortunately it is exactly what the Japanese do with beloved series. You look at all the insane monetization of Neon Genesis Evangelion merchandise and the insane prices that they charge the Japanese to either see Neon Genesis Evangelion movies being made and released, or DVDs being released, Um, it's just really, really crazy. But even at that, I cannot see how this game is going to make it very far out of beta. I don't even think it's going to make it 3 years. It's got no gameplay in it other than, can we convince you that you need to spend money? One of the limitations there is, in the original series, I haven't watched the Clear Card series, there's really only, it seems, 31 cloud cards, which is perfectly fine if you are going to be a serialized manga, which is what it originally was. 31 weeks or 31 months is quite a lot as far as a serialized manga, and it's perfectly fine if you were going to be a 2-season anime series, because you could easily do 26 episodes in one and then take the remaining episodes and stretch them out a little bit and not have a specific card captured each episode, or have 2-part episodes, things like that, per cloud card. So yeah, but 31 is extremely short compared to, say, the 10,000 cards that are in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I need to decide to make another project to make this go up and down by itself if I'm gonna sit here and do nothing. But yeah, the 10,000 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game equates to probably at least 2,000 or 3,000 cards that have been shown in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animes. And certainly there's been five different Yu-Gi-Oh! Animes, many of which had multiple seasons, so a much longer case there. And if you compare it to the 72 cards, I believe, that are in the minor and major arcana of the tarot, 31 is actually about half as many, but it is more than the 13 cards of the major arcana of tarot by quite a bit, which most people only recognize on the tarot: the major arcana, the death cards, the hanged man card, the world card, the devil card. Mostly people barely even recognize death and devil as far as that, but like the 2 of Pentacles in the minor arcana doesn't mean much to most people. And the cloud cards really are not even based off tarot cards. Yeah, they're loosely in the case that they are cards that have pictures on them, but that is also true for playing cards, and the tarot cards were originally created to be extra trumps for playing cards. The mysticism angle on tarot cards was not added until decades later, after they had already been created. So yeah, but yeah, the cloud cards are spells that are just sealed in the form of cards that have personalities themselves and have to be kind of controlled, which I'm sure left them in a good position to make a sequel. They should have made a sequel a lot earlier than what they did. I mean, it really was decades later that the Clear Card series came out. I mean, they took so long to do something more with both Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura that most of the voice actors would have either been retired or dead, and couldn't have revised the role. Maybe that was part of the problem there. Anyways, let's go ahead with video game news. So I've been testing, because I've been testing my new macro, I probably have oversampled some of these dates, but I did go through this chart and try and clean it up. So the sample dates earlier at the top here would be spread out an appropriate amount. That being said, I don't think too much is wrong here. I do think, as far as relevancy is concerned, which is what we're really trying to find here, is who is playing what over the longest period of time. Counter-Strike 2, with its many bots and cheaters, is beating Black Myth Wukong, which is starting to fall farther and farther down the list. As far as it was in the second position, thus it got 99 points out of 100, and now it's in the third position and it's getting 97 points out of 100. I also modified the chart so that this edge here has more of a buffer, and then I played around just to see how many games we really should point out. This still puts me in a very bad position as far as I want to use this to make some end of the year observations. I haven't been sampling for more than a few weeks, maybe a month, maybe two. And at the end of the year, just talking about a lot of people playing Counter-Strike, or a lot of people playing PUBG, or a lot of people playing Dota, is just not going to really be new news. Because that would have been the exact same thing I would have said last year. It would have been the exact same thing I would have said the year before. And so it does make a very good argument to just blacklist all of these games. We won't call it a block list or a blacklist. We'll call it a Hall of Fame just out of kindness. And just say, hey, these games are constantly being played. Whereas Banana is a relevant story. The rise of Banana and the stability of Banana is something that has only happened in 2024. And the talk of Black Myth Wukong is relevant. I think Naraka Blade Point is relevant. GTA 5 is even somewhat relevant. But yeah, and maybe I should make some kind of procedural thing that says, you know what, that would take things out of the Hall of Fame or put them back in the Hall of Fame, because something like GTA 5 potentially could have been in the Hall of Fame as far as just something that wouldn't actually show up on the chart, and instead it may have come back to being relevant because of an anticipated GTA 6 release. Some of these other games, though, as we start to go down further, I think do have more relevancy as far as there's something to talk about it. But yeah, I overall do feel like there is a case here where an end of the year recap is just going to be a very dour experience, saying people just went back to their staple food and ate some meat and potatoes with Counter-Strike 2. The Rodecaster Pro has also done a software update now where you can install a device driver, I think in Windows only, to use it as a virtual device on its faders to turn the volume up and down. This is a fairly complicated feature, but for streamers it could be very useful. I've always wanted to get a Rodecaster Pro, but it's kind of hard to justify it because getting a Rodecaster Pro also would mean I was just going to buy a different microphone, and my microphone's still been working for 10 years, and so there's really no reason to spend the money and change it. But yeah, with virtual devices, certain applications themselves could have their individual volume go up and down as you move the physical fader dial up and down, which can be very helpful with like gaming and streaming in particular, in that you might have different audio feeds for the microphone and for maybe some background music and for the game music and sound effects. Now, I don't think there's really going to be any way, unless you can just program virtual devices to do some kind of hotkey, and even in that, I don't think I've ever seen a game have hotkeys to turn up the music or down the music in the menus. So there's really no standard there to separate the audio streams in a video game into their own pipelines. Windows certainly doesn't make that very easy. I would assume Pipewire in Linux is working towards making that more of a thing. But yeah, Direct Audio probably should implement a new standard where you must label sound effects as sound effects, vocals as vocals, music as music, and then there should be a standard operating system level in which you can adjust those volumes as far as any Microsoft DirectX type application. And there should be some kind of hotkey that could be done to adjust that. But yeah, none of that really has to do with the Rodecaster Pro getting more software updates. It's nice to see it continue to get software updates. I personally suggested some things to the Rodecaster Pro. The touchpads being able to be used as hotkeys instead of the touchpads only being able to play preloaded sound effects was a suggestion that I personally asked them to implement, and they did very quickly. And so I feel kind of bad that I never really could budget to buy their hardware after they went out of their way to program it to do exactly what I wanted it to do. So hopefully other people are finding that useful as a future. God of War Ragnarok is probably the biggest news today. Talk about bearing the lead, being available on Steam. I'm not sure if there's anything else worth that's new to say about Steam. Otherwise, Steam Decks are still on sale. I did see one YouTuber suggesting getting the 64GB model, but then his argument seemed to be completely confused. And frankly, this YouTuber, I'm thinking he's not particularly as smart as I would like, for lack of a nicer way to say it, because his argument, if I was understanding him correctly, was that you should buy the 64GB model because buying a 1TB micro SD card is more expensive, or buying a 512GB micro SD card is more expensive than buying the 512GB model, which is completely wrong there, because that's not the comparison to make at all. You can buy any size micro SD card you want. You're almost certainly, both because of the interface speed, which I don't know what that is on the Steam Deck, but also because of the speed of the micro SD card itself, that's going to be way slower storage, and it always should be decided and thought of as being way slower storage. That is your cold storage to put slower things. You put music and movies on that, or you put ROMs that are very small, and the loading speed of a 1MB ROM is going to not be noticed versus the loading speed of 20GB of a more modern game. The non-volatile NVMe memory built into the Steam Deck, the internal hard drives equivalents, are way faster, way faster. So the comparison, it would be, is it cheaper to buy the 64GB version of the Steam Deck LCD and then buy a new 512GB model and put it into open up your Steam Deck, which includes some pretty big risks to do that. You could definitely break the whole thing, and then put a 512 in there. Can you do that for the $40 difference? And the answer to that is definitely no. while it's on sale. It is totally the case that you should buy the 512 gigabyte model, unless you come to some kind of realization that you can get either more storage cheaper than 512 gigabytes or faster storage than what's built in. But if you went faster storage, there's still a decent chance that the Steam Deck interface may not be really capable of handling that. And the internal non-volatile memory state at the moment is pretty stable, where you're going to get somewhere around, I think it's 3,300 megabits per second to maybe, if you buy a really expensive one, which may not come in the small form factor that you would need, you might get double that. Now, Samsung has just announced a new technology that's going to almost certainly be very expensive for doubling that speed as far as internal hard drive. You may very well be smashing into the speeds of other issues like the North Bridge not being fast enough or the CPU not being fast enough. So really fast NVMe may not be worth it. But that is all also issues that makes a good argument to not buy the Steam Deck LCD at all, because you are still just buying something that is 2.5 years old. The other thing the YouTuber talked about was he talked about Steam families and said that Steam families could be people that don't have to be in the same household, when every time Steam has said it and described it, they've said they have to be in the same household. And so he's just saying like the exact opposite. And the way he talked about it after that was he was talking about how he had this personal experience. Interesting, God of War Ragnarok. He is getting a mixed review. Let's check that out. He had this personal experience where somebody was using the previous version of Steam sharing, and he got in a fight with that person because the person was using his library and not really paying anything, and then trying to play the game, a game that he had just bought day one, which does sound like a very crappy thing if you're getting access to a video game and you understand that you're not paying into it. You shouldn't be the one getting first pick. But to relay that on a YouTube video and look at that YouTube video and edit that YouTube video and think that that is the way you want to present yourself just speaks volumes to your lack of understanding of how content should be. So is this going to be 100%? We don't an issue with the PlayStation Network. HDR has to be turned on each time you boot up the game. Mouse snapping issues, especially when locking on target and PSN login thing. Seems like it's mostly the PlayStation Network is the reason why it's being negatively reviewed. So yeah. Is that a fair criticism? I think absolutely. There are people here that are not happy with the PlayStation Network, or finding that the PlayStation Network is not working for them at all. Now, there is, I guess, a argument to say, hey, there's a notice here, so if this notice was here day one, you could say, well, people should have seen this notice and not bought the game if they were going to have problems with PlayStation Network. But then at a certain point, if you were to make that argument, then all negative reviews could be invalidated on the fact that you can't put a negative review on a game or review on a game without purchasing it and maybe getting it refunded. You can see this person did less than an hour of gameplay. This one did 3.1 hours. So people are going out of their way and spending money to review it negatively, and maybe then they are refunding the money, which, you know, in the real world, there is something to that too. We've never really seen purchasing and then refunding campaigns on products, and I imagine because it's a little bit different in the real world. If you went to a grocery store and purchased a product you hated, then refunded it, you're making just extra work for the store, whereas the whole refund and purchasing process is probably hurting the store more than it's hurting the actual manufacturer of the product, because there's probably some transaction fees and refund fees happening every time you purchase and refund something. Now, if you hated the store, there's an argument to do that, but then most stores also have some severe limitations on refunds, and with the exception of like lemon law cars, there really aren't a lot of laws that say somebody has to honor refunds or give you a refund. Amazon.com is perhaps the store that gets the most amount of refunds, and arguably deserves it the most, because they also allow a lot of garbage to be sold on their platform. But yeah, it's different somewhat. It's mostly different on PC and gaming. And there is, I guess, an argument here that for the consumer to get a better reception or understanding of how people feel about the game, there should be a case where people who haven't purchased the game should be allowed to in some way interact more with negative reviews. And I guess you can do some of that, where you can potentially say it's helpful, but you can't write your own review. And we certainly have seen game developers in the past try to abuse the system severely, having games at like $1,000 or something where nobody would dare actually purchase it to give it a negative review, but then that tends to be so expensive that they tend to have no positive reviews either. But yeah, this would be an end of year recap thing to point out, that the PlayStation's handling of PC gaming is still particularly bad. And yeah, day to day, I don't think anything new is gonna change here. So let's move on to Video Games Chronicles. One of the things with the new macros, I'm trying to eliminate yet another extension, trying to use the least amount of Firefox extensions as possible. So it's going to move things around back to the more traditional things, where I'll start with tabs on the left and move my way to the right. I'm not sure specifically at what point I stopped really needing it to start on the right and move to the left. I'm not sure I ever actually needed it to work that way, and I just thought I did. That being said, I'm not sure I'm actually eliminating any extensions either, because I still need it to open new tabs directly to the right of the current tab, which is not the default behavior. But there might be a way to make it the default behavior instead of having an extension. Extensions use a lot of RAM per page, and so there's a high motivation to eliminate as many and use built-in features if possible. Anyways, Video Game Chronicle news. Also tweaked some things here. There may still be some room for improvement as far as fiddling, but yeah. The headlines, I think, are getting a little bit better, a little easier to read. I still feel like the text in most cases is it's a little too small. Probably not super small, but it does just feel like these headlines should be bigger. Tetsuya Nomura says he's considering retirement and concluding the Kingdom Hearts story. Kingdom Hearts 4 was announced in 2022. So concluding the story is an interesting phrase, because I have no idea how concluded the story really is at the end of any of the Kingdom Hearts games, particularly I would assume Kingdom Hearts 3, but I guess Kingdom Hearts 4 is where it's going to stop. It would, I think, make a lot of sense to end the Kingdom Hearts series, because the concept of the Kingdom Hearts series is a concept that just doesn't make a lot of sense now, in the sense that Final Fantasy is not what it once was. Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 13 being the peak of Final Fantasy games, whereas 15 and 16 have been not particularly well received. Square Enix thinks every game that gets released is below their insanely high expectations, so there's really no reason to do Final Fantasy anyways. And if I were Disney, I would say, hey, we don't need Final Fantasy in an RPG game that has a bunch of Disney characters. We can easily take something like a mix between maybe Epic Mickey and Kingdom Hearts and do our own thing, which would make a lot more sense. And they probably just call it not even Epic Mickey, they call it probably something closer to Fantasia Online. But yeah, the whole human aspect of the Final Fantasy and the craziness of the story, you can take a lot of that craziness and smooth it down a little bit and still have a JRPG game with Disney characters. And if I was Disney, I would be fairly pissed that because of Kingdom Hearts, they, from their side, are locked into having Disney characters only interact with Final Fantasy style characters, instead of potentially having Disney characters travel to different dimensions and interacting with lots of other Japanese characters that could exist. Like, I could see it working fairly well that there would just be a bunch of crossover type events, or one massive crossover event where you have Disney characters showing up in Mario games, or Disney characters showing up in Atelier or Dragon Quest games, things like that. And yeah, particularly I guess at this point, Marvel since Disney owns Marvel, it would make a lot more sense to merge the Marvel universe and the Disney universe in a Kingdom Hearts like game, where it is Mickey Mouse going to Spider-Man's location. Yeah, a Spider-Man into the multiverse concept might work fairly well. It probably is right, just based on Tetsuya Nomura's age, for him to wrap up Kingdom Hearts. A general reboot of just doing the exact same thing but smoothing out the gameplay, making it more approachable, certainly would work too. Just handing it over. He's also doing the Final Fantasy VII Remake, so him retiring after that makes a lot of sense too. He's only 54, which by Japanese standards is quite young, so I assume his retirement really is just going to be a case of him leaving Square Enix. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does just leave Square Enix and start a new company, or work for a new company, or work for a different company. Space Marine 2's boss supposed comment condemns games that impose morals. All he wanted was a throwback game. Which, you know, that's not that controversial, frankly. It is perhaps controversial by modern standards that a CEO would have made a comment anywhere, and frankly, if you're upper management at this point, you should really just wipe any internet presence you ever had. And if you're a kid these days, you probably shouldn't have a internet presence, or at the very least have an alias from day one and never let that alias be known. But yeah, particularly if you're talking like Space Marine games and Warhammer games, I don't know how much morals you really should be talking about there. The whole game is based off of a very different society with a very different moral system, and there's just not a lot there. There has been some weirdness with like Dungeons and Dragons in that they have imposed a lot of morals with their rule sets, but you really don't have to listen to the rule sets. I think there might have been some weirdness around Warhammer 40k too. I know one of them in particular, I can't remember which, has been accused of being fairly sexist in that all of the male versions of characters were good and all of the evil versions of characters were female. Which, yeah, maybe there was something a little bit more than subconscious to that, or you would have to assume, but yeah, those are weird things to complain about. And frankly, PC politics in nerd games like Warhammer and Dungeons and Dragons is not going to help those genres grow anymore. Sure, Dungeons and Dragons peoples have been stereotyped as stinky, smelly nerds who will never get a girlfriend, and typically I guess you'd call them incels by modern parlance. But yeah, them becoming a bunch of woke scolds, if that's the right phrase, it's not gonna really fix that either. Just let the art evolve naturally and let the fandom do whatever they want and try to grow the fandom. Inclusivity is an issue, certainly, but I don't think driving out to your original audience, which is the danger there, is going to bring in a new audience that was just never going to be interested in it at all. I mean, if you look at the Warhammer 40k art style and stuff like that, it is clearly designed to appeal to little boys way more than little girls. So yeah, unless they're going to do Warhammer My Little Pony crossovers, it's never going to bring in a major fandom of mostly female players. I think Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop games like that are super long, tend to not attract females anyways, because I just think females have more going on with their time and more options, maybe even slightly better taste when they're younger. Let's not get stuck on a rant though. So Nintendo and the Pokemon Company announced that they were going to sue Palworld developer, which I wish I knew the name of the Palworld developer at the moment. It seems like the updated bit of information here is that they're suing them in Japan for patent infringement, which is to say they're going to try and make an argument which in the United States I would say is probably going to be a weak argument, that the idea of RPG games in general belong to a shared patent or several shared patents between the Pokemon Company and Nintendo, unless there's some specific element of Palworld and Pokemon that is patentable, but I can't imagine what it really was. The idea of Digimon came out before Pokemon, so there shouldn't be any kind of patent to that. The idea of RPG games came out decades before Pokemon did. The idea of evolving, I'm not sure evolving even exists in Palworld, is a natural process, so the thought of something evolving or changing shouldn't be patentable in general. But even the way Pokemon evolve with getting level XP and things like that, those are all things that happened way before Pokemon came out. Frankly, the whole idea of Pokemon is that it was just baby's first RPG, and there isn't, I think, any unique ideas or systems in Pokemon that should be patentable. And yeah, it definitely is an even worse case scenario as far as discouraging indies to pursue ideas if the Japanese courts decide that Nintendo does own a patent that prevents other people from making RPG games. It'll be interesting to see what happens here. I'm not sure how public the Japanese patent courts would really be. And certainly, as far as gamers, this is a case where if you're not on Palworld's side, you're going to only be hurting yourself, because not only is this going to be a shocking blow to anybody else trying to make a RPG game that's even slightly close to Pokemon, it's going to be a shocking blow to several games that have already also come out. One would assume that Nintendo was either getting its lawyers in a row or waiting for Palworld to make a significant amount of money that they can, I assume, try and claim. Although I'm not sure that Japanese patent law works that way. I'm not sure if you get 100% of the proceeds like you would under copyright law. The fact that they're suing under patent law instead of copyright pretty much is an admission by Nintendo that they don't have copyrights on the general idea of animals and monsters, and that if you are parroting, even if you're parroting Pokemon quite a bit, there is some fair use even under Japanese law to that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the outcome is there, but I also am a little concerned that the outcome will be wrong there too, that they will just side with Nintendo. I personally just have no idea how corrupt the patent legal system may be in Japan, or how corrupt Japan may be in general. If you told me that secretly the Yakuza ran all of Japan, like war behind the emperor and everything like that, it's believable. It really is, because the level of organization that the Yakuza have compared to the disorganization of gangs and crime bosses in the United States. I mean, it's really just a night and day difference there. So yeah, I definitely could put on my tinfoil hat and believe in a conspiracy theory that the patent judges might just get bribed directly by Nintendo to have Nintendo succeed, or that the Yakuza is secretly still funding and running Nintendo, and they're going to bribe or threaten judges. All of that is unprovable conspiracy talk, certainly, but it's because of my lack of knowledge and of the situation, it feels like it could be the case. Also, it's not uncommon for me to have heard several stories of what seem like grave misjustices as far as the legal system and the government in general in Japan. Not that the US government's any better, but I'll leave it at that. Yeah, same updated story here with this. And so, looks like I have some more tweaking I need to do from this Video Games Chronicle website, because this white background, that's not too bad. Minecraft is dropping PlayStation VR support next year. Their ability to support PlayStation VR has come to an end, Mojang has said. Minecraft also said that they were going to do several smaller updates and no longer large updates. It definitely feels like Microsoft is giving less support to Mojang, or Mojang is running out of money to support themselves, and we are seeing a perhaps very slow process of Minecraft going into more of a maintenance mode. I imagine Minecraft will just be around forever as far as digital Legos, in the same way that Legos will probably still be around forever. But I do think that there probably will be some generational shifts in which Minecraft and Legos both stop being as popular, and they are thought of as just kind of older things. Minecraft, compared to Satisfactory, is much more of a survival experience, from what I can tell. So, but Satisfactory looks a lot nicer, and yeah, you probably could make a much nicer game that had most of the same concepts of Minecraft, and I'm sure multiple people have already done that. Of course, that also is a story about how VR has just not really succeeded to gain enough of a fan base to be worth anything. Cities Skylines 2 DLC has been delayed again. Yep, which, man, boy has that release been a mess. That potentially is an end of the year news story to talk about. There is just how terrible the City Skylines 2 launch has been. PlayStation's next State of Play broadcast is coming next week, it's claimed. Sony is reportedly planning a PlayStation showcase for late September. One would hope that they try and turn around the negativity around the PlayStation Pro by announcing a bunch of games that they're going to try and show off. And I don't know how you do this on YouTube or streaming, But the idea is to show off some really high quality footage of potentially new games or remakes, and show off those games all playing on the PlayStation 5 Pro. That being said, this is also from Jeff Grubb, and my feelings around Jeff Grubb's accuracy are not particularly high. I wish people would stop really considering him a source without somebody else confirming it. Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone Season 6 patch notes detail today's update. You can check out Video Games Chronicles right now if you want to read that article. EA Sports FC 25 Celtic vs Ranger full match is also on Video Games Chronicles, so it seems to be Video Games Chronicles going really crazy and having EA Sports have two teams simulate a real-world football match. That's what that seems like that is, which is not very relevant to me. The XDefiant studio claims the game is absolutely not dying. Ubisoft is very much behind us and has allocated more resources to the team. Okay, I guess pretty much all you can say in those kinds of situations. And then Final Fantasy 16 crashes and graphical issues are linked to PS5 system update. Square Enix is investigating the issue with Sony. I don't even have a lot of Gematsu articles to cover today, but I'm gonna have to take a bathroom break anyways between this, so I'm gonna pause the video and I'll be back in about 10 or 20 minutes. Okay, I'm back. I can tell you I already feel like I'm rather tired today. Let's see. Yeah, I definitely don't expect I'll accomplish too much more today, and a lot of that is not only that I'm just getting interrupted a lot of times that are making it impossible for me to make content or progress and accomplish much of anything, but also my general sleep schedule has been interrupted, so I'm not finding a good time to sleep for 8 hours in a row as is typical, and instead it's just like being tired and taking a nap for a small amount of time, an hour or two, maybe getting 4 hours as far as a nap, then being woken up again and still being tired and then going back to sleep for another 4 hours. It's just like it never really catches up. But yeah, and also we are in the United States moving into some deeper parts of summer, more than you would normally would, so it's still pretty hot and not getting to the point of a fall point or nowhere close to a winter point. Anyways, that's enough whining. Let's get back to video game news. I guess we're probably going to GameDeveloper.com news, not Gematsu news next. Yes, this is actually GameDeveloper.com. I'm not sure if Gematsu news stories just got moved to a different location. I'm not sure why it would be in a different location, but it seems like that's the case. So Payday 3 gets a crew shift as the director steps down, with game director Mediodrag Kovacevic no longer leading. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Starbreeze is on the hunt for someone to help turn Payday 3 around. Weirdly, they don't seem like they have anyone to name. It's I guess temporarily going to be the lead producer Andreas Pinniger and global brand director Almar Listo. So 2 people. I wish these names meant something more. You can even click on these names, which brings about an interesting question as far as what would that do. It's taking me directly to their LinkedIn profile, which that's a wild picture for a LinkedIn profile, certainly. But yeah, we are in this really bad situation, particularly where you're talking about employees in the game industry or employees in most industries, and you're just sent to LinkedIn, which is not a particularly useful website, and it's full of a lot of garbage is the biggest problem with it. They tried to make it a social website when really it should have been locked down much closer to what I imagine Zillow is, in that there should just be a centralized page for each person's resume and work profile, perhaps some direct messaging capabilities. But once LinkedIn started adding the ability to post content, and then there started to be a bunch of people on there posting content, it went off the rails. Another major problem with LinkedIn, and this is just a major problem with trying to have a job anywhere, is that there's just a lot of recruiters and scammers who are desperately trying to contact people. A lot of recruiters are trying to get you placed into some kind of job. A lot of times it might be a temporary job. A lot of times it might be a job that is not really what the recruiter is describing it as, which is often the fault of the company itself listing the job inaccurately, because often they hand the task of listing a job description over to HR instead of having the manager of that position write the job description. But yeah, recruiters get kickbacks for every person they put into it, to extreme amounts, like entire dollars on an hourly salary. So you might be getting paid, let's say $20 an hour, whereas the company might be paying somewhere around $30 of an hour to the recruiter, and the recruiter is keeping $10 of every hour that you work. Supposedly this is to pay into unemployment, which isn't really easy to get if you are working a temp job, because you have to work a certain amount, you have to work more than 30 days in a lot of cases, or work more than 6 months in a year. There's all kinds of rules that makes it very much a case where they are intentionally hiring and firing people on temporary jobs, so nobody actually qualifies for unemployment, and screwing with people's lives that way. But yeah, otherwise it's just money directly going into recruiters' pockets. So it puts this weird financial interest into LinkedIn, where more than already the interest should be just placing people in the best job they can get. And certainly it's not helpful when linking to a person from a video game news site. Yeah, I still very much think an IMDb for video game employees makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, I just don't think it would be super easy to do it. We'd have to have a lot of gamers become fans and unpaid moderators. Okay, moving on. Saber Interactive nets a significant equity investment to pay for Embracer's debts. The investment will also enable Saber to kickstart growth initiatives on a global scale. This is a story we've already kind of talked about. This is weird, this Alien vs. Predator crossover with Warhammer. Or Predator versus Warhammer, I guess. Let's see. I don't think there's anything else to really say there. And then Absurd Ventures and Immortals of Avium developers have launched Marin Studio. There's an update here that says Absurd Marin CEO Brett Robbins said that his new studio starts on its first project, Ascendant, will go dark and for the foreseeable future, which would make a lot of sense. There's just not a lot of reasons why you would have anything to say if you just started a new company. And certainly you're in this weird situation as a gamer to say, well, Immortals of Avium was a huge failure. Was it completely a huge failure because it didn't have enough publishing and advertising behind it, or was it a huge failure because the game was actually not good enough? It's kind of hard to tell in those situations. So when you are in that situation as a gamer, it's kind of hard to be excited to have a new company announced. And when you get down into more of the logic of it, a new company that has some or most or even all of the people who worked on Immortals of Avium and Absurd Ventures is still just going to be a totally different mix and environment and a totally different way things are run. So there is really very little evidence that this new company would make anything close to what Immortals of Avium is. In a funny way, Peter Molyneux is a great example of that, in that he started a new company, feels like nearly a decade and a half ago, and only now is slightly implying he's going to make something like Fable. Whereas his new company could have been working on something like Fable a long time ago and didn't. They couldn't call it Fable, maybe set it in a different type of world, maybe a sci-fi setting instead of a fantasy setting or something like that. But you know, it's a little weird that there aren't more RPG style games just set in modern day. Like Persona is, I guess, the closest thing to something like that, but there's a lot of fantasy, there's a lot of sci-fi. Well, there's less sci-fi, but there's still a lot of sci-fi. But almost no modern day, almost no ancient history RPGs. I suppose Horizon is an example of something that's sci-fi, but a little bit different. Yeah. With the exception of Persona, I can't think of anything else that would be modern. And I guess there aren't too many horror setting RPG games out there. That might be interesting too, but it would have to be more of an action horror game, I would imagine. Scopely has canceled an unannounced project and begins transitioning that team to other work. Scopely says it has every intention of keeping employees on from the project, which very little details there makes it difficult to really see that as much of a story. It's probably good news compared to the alternative, which would have just been Scopely lays off an entire group of people after canceling a project. So I guess Scopely deserves a little bit of applause for that. And then the alleged images of the Nintendo's new console, which we assume is called the Switch 2, appeared online a few days ago. But they don't really have any of the pictures directly loaded on Video Games Chronicle here, which is what this headline is. One of the things I was able to figure out was how to get some of these pages to scroll back up once my new macro works. So we'll have less of a case where I click on a tab and I'm way down here. this case I scrolled down myself, so I can't, that normally wouldn't happen. So where did all the Gematsu articles go? I guess we should probably just open up Gematsu and see, because I don't have any Gematsu articles open at all, and that seems like a oversight, to say the least. Okay, go to Gematsu, browse, and then turn this on. This. We'll click on all of these stories. Some of these may not be news stories doing it this way. Something should have been left open. This won't take too long. Opening a whole bunch of pages at the same time, though, will cause it to try and slow me down. And that's part of the reason why I'm making the new macro, is to try and prevent that from happening and just still have things move fast. Hopefully it actually works. There is this unfortunate danger, though, that all my efforts are going to actually be for naught, because it's going to turn out that it's not much faster. One of the issues here is no amount of speed is fast enough, because I really want it to be instantaneous. But there's no way for it to be instantaneous. To go through all these links, even me manually doing it in this pattern, takes a while. I guess if I had a program just constantly running, it might be instantaneous, but I don't think that would be worth it. Yeah, I think we've covered the rest of these, so we'll end it at that. Because I remember talking about this game, Monpic. And we probably talked about these review scores. And then we haven't had any update on the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster potentially coming out. We covered that. We covered that. A game called Nico de Rico, The Magical World, launches October 15th for the PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and then later for the PC. Scrolling down these pages mostly just to see if they visually look good. Luma Island launches November 20th. The Steam Next Fest is available on October 40th. I know I was able to modify one of these sources to make these subheadlines more balanced. There's a text wrap equals balanced CSS style. So if something is going to wrap around, it's going to make the second line the same width, or as close as it can get to the same width as the first line, which for subheadlines that makes a lot of sense. Whereas maybe it makes a little less sense for the headlines, but even then it might make a lot of sense. Keep things just balanced. Slime 3K Rise Against Despots launches October 31st. And then we talked about this one. Rivals of Aether launches October 23rd. Margin still coming a little off the edge here on this one. Not sure why. Let's see. Ninth Dawn Remake launches September 25th. The Book of Nameless novel due out at the same date. I guess this is an open world RPG. It's kind of crazy how many RPGs are actually based around fantasy stuff, because it's not like Dungeons and Dragons fantasy stuff is really that popular. Yeah. It perhaps were way more popular generations ago in Japan, but I don't think a modern kid really cares too much about knights and dragons and things like that. Not particularly when it's not tied directly to some noticeable name brand like Lord of the Rings. I've been doing way too much shopping on Amazon recently, and I was looking at chip on board LEDs, cob lighting is what it's called, which gives you just like a continuous strip, or what looks like a almost complete continuous strip of lights instead of individual LEDs that then have to be diffused. And the pricing difference seems to have really lowered the individual LEDs quite a bit. But then I think there's just a level here where one of the chipsets in particular was not very long lived. I think 2812 chips of LEDs, and it's being phased out. And definitely I would say, in my experience and experiments with them, you want something that is capable of doing 24 volts, not just 3 volts or 5 volts, because you want to push as much power. Frankly, you probably want to do something that could do even more than 24 volts, but they're not making chips that can do more than 24 volts. Yeah, theoretically, you would want to take the full 120 out of a United States plug and be able to shove that down untransformed, shove it down a long line of cob lights and LEDs, and get super bright whole house outdoor lighting or whole house indoor lighting, which is really what I'm realizing is probably the better use for LED strips now, is to do whole house either around the floorboards or around the roof line, the ceiling line of a room, just whole house lighting, instead of having ceiling fan lamps that don't really equally light an area, or floor lamps taking up square footage in the house. But we're probably not to the point where that makes a lot of sense, but that's what I'd like to have happen. As for outdoor lighting that you want to be more decorative, or indoor lighting where you want individual control IC chips, I don't think that technology has improved a lot, and the software I don't think has improved much at all. So I don't think you're really in a great point to buy individually controllable LEDs. Well, you're as bad of a situation as you were probably a year ago. You probably would want to wait a couple months after like Christmas, where a bunch of them will be sold as Christmas lights and the stock and inventory might go down more. Of course, none of that has to do with video games. I'm just kind of rambling and showing where my focus has been. Yeah. Back to video game news from Komatsu. Button City Soccer Days X Among Us collaboration has been announced. We seem to be increasingly getting quite a lot of collabs between some weird things. And Nintendo and the Pokemon Company filed a lawsuit against Pocket Pair for Powell. Pocket Pair, the name of the company, finally got the name. The update here is a response from Pocket Pair. in a funny way, now Pocket Pair in their response is capable of saying, well, we're not going to be able to continue to update Palworld as fast as we would have now that we're being sued. Whereas in reality, Palworld has been kind of slow to update anyways. So yeah, they've given, Nintendo has actually given Palworld a great excuse, and it's kind of hard to argue against it. Let's see, Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven demo is now available. Yeah, you want those games right, so here you go. Now let's see him clear them. 1+2 has been announced for PS4 and 5, Switch and PC. I saw the Game Grumps play these games. It's, I don't think really a huge amount of levels per game, but in reality it's probably more than enough, because all of these games that you see ads for really only interesting for a very short amount of time, and then they get repetitive very quickly. So having a PC version of those games that you can satisfy your whim and having it bundled so you can both of them, it's a pretty good offering than downloading a whole bunch of random mobile games that then don't even really deliver on what they promise. Ballad of Atara gameplay showcase video is available on Gametsu. Some of these stories I feel like I've covered before, and some of them feel like they're brand new. These might all be brand new. Double Dragon Revive, Tokyo Game Show 2024 gameplay introduction trailer and screenshots. So yeah, here's a great example where this being balanced probably would have made more sense. Double Dragon Revive. I shouldn't. Looks like a weird collection of characters. Guess the best thing to do would be to scroll over here, bring the tab back and show it off, then drag it to work on it later. Inherently, I think this is the kind of game that runs into that issue where a small resolution, low resolution beat 'em up game like Double Dragon from many decades ago leaves only a small foundation as far as what the characters by modern art style should be animated as, which then creates this weird situation where the characters that you're creating are effectively just whole cloth new creations, and thus they don't have any major nostalgia tied to them. Yeah, I'm looking at each of these characters and I don't recognize any of them, and I couldn't tell you the names. I would assume that these are the two brothers, and I would assume this is a bad guy and that's a bad guy, and everybody else is probably a bad guy. It may very well be a case that Double Dragon as a series just cannot really be revived. Anyways, speaking of really weird crossovers that I've been seeing, Fight Crab Early Access version 0.8.00.0, that's weird that it has a 00, is now available, and it adds an El Shaddai Ascension of the Metatron collaboration, which the only reason I could assume that that is the case is that it's either it was really easy negotiation, or the two people knew each other or were friends with each other, or they're owned by the same company. It does just seem very weird. Like, Fight Crab is not Crab God. So, yeah, it's not that game. Yeah, that just seems very weird, but Fight Crab 2, I guess, is also a weird game, so 2 weird games, I guess, makes even weirderness. Legend of Heroes Kai no Kisekai has detailed 3 more characters and Day 1 DLC. Where we got? You know, I really should work on setting a maximum height on these pictures too, because this isn't even me modifying anything really. It's always been a case on Gematsu that the pictures often have been put out at the highest resolution, no accounting at all for the height of the window. So often it's been a case where you just have to scroll down 3 or 4 pages to see the characters. It's also kind of weird, you get these 2D animations of these characters and then that's not how they're actually depicted in the game. And we're really not at a point where I guess this is the DLCs. Everybody's going to be in some bunny girl type outfits, bunny guy type outfits. Bunny guy is not being particularly anywhere as commonplace as bunny girl, playboy, bunny type outfits. But yeah, it's been kind of fairly less common recently that you have mixed animation styles in games, and I'm glad for it. Chibi as an animation style here is still a little common, and it's always kind of a pain when you have a cutscene where the characters look fairly good. In this case it would be in 3D CGI style, and then all of a sudden you have gameplay and the characters are chibi style, which is not the case I think in this game, where you have 3D CGI for the gameplay and then you have flat 2D anime for the other. It's also still very weird that Gematsu just kind of duplicates their pictures when they do these kinds of galleries. So yeah, it's another thing to tinker with, I think. Tribe 9 limited time deadly demo for PC is going to be available from October 15th to the 22nd, featuring over 20 hours of content. Still haven't really gotten a feel as far as what Tribe 9 actually is going to be as far as its story and as far as its actual gameplay. Then the Famitsu sales from the 9th to the 15th of September have been updated. This is always a game of where does PlayStation first show up among otherwise dominating Nintendo Switch sales. And in this case, PS5 has managed to have Astrobot as a software be in the second spot, only being beaten by, shockingly to me, the Hokkaido Serial Murder Case, which is a visual novel game. I wonder if that is because there is just a lot more nostalgia in Japan for this than I thought. It's selling 20,000 units where this only sold 8,000 units. Otherwise, the top 10 is dominated by the Nintendo Switch. Old games, still selling like hotcakes. And I'm not sure if there's another new game. Gundam Breaker 4 in the 14th spot. Visions of Mana in the 18th spot for the PS4, PS5. Test Drive Unlimited for the PS5, being a new game, in the 24th spot. And that's really the only new game this week. Meanwhile, hardware is still selling like crazy. The Switch OLED model is on some decent sales right now. If you check out slickdeals.net for it. This obviously because the leaks of the next Nintendo Switch have come out. It wouldn't likely be the worst time to consider, if you assume all the rumors are true about what the next Nintendo Switch is going to be, and you aren't excited by what the next Nintendo Switch is going to be, then this Christmas season would be the time to consider buying the OLED model. Or if you just feel like you need a backup one in case one of them breaks, now would be the time to buy the OLED model. Inherently, there probably will be deeper sales and discounts, but for something like the Switch, I imagine if anything goes on big discount, it will fly off the shelves incredibly fast. I wouldn't be surprised if there's doorbuster Black Friday type sales for the Switch OLED and the Switch Lite, and even original Switches. I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon Prime's Big Prime Day has a decent sale on a Switch, but it is certainly a difficult decision as far as, do you want to spend your money now to get a backup Switch, knowing that potentially even before next Christmas you're going to be buying a Switch 2, or do you want to just save up for a Switch 2? There is still also the argument that if your kids are slightly older and they're moving closer to being 14 or 15 years old, then Steam Deck makes a lot more sense. If you can get the kids to a point where you're okay with them playing T for Teen games on the Steam Deck, that's the minimum, I think, there. In reality, though, the vast majority of PC games are for mature, so if you have a huge collection on Steam or plan on building a huge collection of games on Steam, most of them are going to be for mature for some reason. Usually it's just violence or scariness. That is also true with the Xbox. It's also true with the PlayStation. I wouldn't recommend buying an Xbox or PlayStation this Christmas season. Speaking of PlayStations, we have PlayStation also selling 8,000 units for the PS5, less than 2,000 for the PS5 Digital Edition. So in Japan in particular, the disc drive is still super popular comparatively, and then PS4 is just not selling any units at all, 39 units over the entire country, and Xbox Series X and S not selling amazing numbers either, which they never really have, although they were doing better some weeks. Magical Bakery launches November 7th. I guess today I'm not bothering to actually click on any Steam links from Gematsu, just to save some time. No More Room in Hell 2 launches in early access on October 22nd. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero Super and movie character trailers and screenshots, with the final 28 characters announced, which I assume this is your character selection screen, which is quite a mess there. Yeah. Weirdly, with their full roster coming out and being shown, I still don't know if this is just a pure fighting game or if there's something more to it. Noticeably also, I don't recognize those first two characters, or that character, or that character, unless these are characters that are from the newest and probably the last Dragon Ball anime series that hasn't aired in the West. That, I believe, is Broly, some form of him. So Broly and the Dragon Ball movies that introduced Broly are set in the past, almost completely disconnecting itself from the Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z characters. And then I assume these are just different Friezas, different cells. There's a Red Ribbon Army character I don't recognize. Red Ribbon Army being Dragon Ball related. Yeah, just going through this entire collection, I'm not recognizing any of those characters, which, yeah, that could certainly be a problem with playing any Dragon Ball game, is that I may not be very informed as far as the character set, and so if I was going to play one, I'd probably want to play one that would tell me some story and backstory of the characters so I could learn a little bit more. There was at least one Dragon Ball mobile game that also had just a massive amount of characters, and I don't believe that succeeded very well. There's enough characters in the Dragon Ball universe to make a gacha game where you try to collect all the characters, but it runs into a major problem where you really only want like 2 or 3 of those characters, and that's it, and maybe 20 variants of those same characters in total. You run into the same problem with Cardcaptor Sakura, in that really there's only Cardcaptor Sakura as a character that is interesting to collect, and so of all the gacha chibi figurines you can collect, all of them are of Sakura, with the exception of a tiny, less than 10 handful of companion characters. And the anime series does have companion characters, but they are very much friends and family of Sakura. She is very much the main character that the camera is always focused on and interested in, which makes for a bad gacha game too. Compare that to a more open-ended gacha game like Memento Mori, which I'm still playing, in which you can just constantly make new characters and introduce them, which works fairly well. I'm still playing the adult game Tinkafuma, which also is introducing new characters nonstop, and can keep on doing that. Moving on, Power Wash Simulator DLC Shrek Special Pack launches October 10th, which Power Wash Simulator, I guess, is still popular enough, and Shrek as a meme or Shrek as a character. I think at this point Shrek has probably evolved completely away from being a meme to the people these days actually having a genuine love for Shrek in his full glory, which is interesting to say the least that it's gone that way. Although that kind of happens with a lot of things that people start off ironically hating, is eventually it just becomes comfortable to the point where people are like, oh, well, I kind of like it. I mean, it's not the coolest thing ever. Personally, I've never seen any of the Shrek movies, so I really have no relation to Shrek at all. So every time I see anything Shrek, I'm like, okay, I guess they're still doing that. I'm still not interested in it. I'm a little too old to have been watching Shrek movies when they came out. 2 Point Museum launches March 4th. Apparently with some Sonic Sega crossover stuff too. Maybe if you pre-order you get the Sonic Sega stuff. The idea of Sonics in a museum is kind of silly though, unless you're talking a video game museum. Anomaly Agent is coming to the PS4 and 5 on October 17th. Currently it's available for the Xbox One, Switch, Series, and PC. One of the things about me not particularly looking at Twitter as much these days is I'm not going to get any notifications or updates from something like the National Video Game Museum in Frisco, Texas. Not that they put out a ton of updates anyways, but yeah, a lot of those third tier news sources where it's just like one organization, the International Game Developers Forum, the IGDF, for instance. If I just stop looking at Twitter, which I very likely am going to stop doing, I'll just stop getting that information. Although, in fairness, I'm also wasting a lot of time these days shopping and looking on Facebook for basically nothing. So I could shift more of my attention to at least looking at Twitter and having a better curated experience there than looking at Facebook. Let's see. A side-scrolling roguelike action game called Anomaly President has been announced for PC. One would assume this is a sequel or a spin-off game. A PlayStation's 30th anniversary collection has been announced. Limited edition designs for the PS5 consoles and accessories. I think they said somewhere that they were going to only make like 12,000 units of this, which people were complaining, one, that it wasn't 12,345, so it would go all the way from 1 to 5, and 2, that was just too few of a number. Not sure what these arrows are supposed to be actually used for. The problem I think you mostly are going to run into this is that most of the people who are fans of the PlayStation are not the people who played PlayStation 1. And so maybe they ran the number. Yeah, it's 12,300 units. So if they had just added 45 more units, it would have gone to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In fact, they could have probably just lied about that. I wouldn't be surprised if the manufacturers specifically had a limit where doing any more than 12,300 units would have cost extra. Although generally, if you make a few more, then they're happier and it costs less. You also run into a major problem now where these devices could easily just be skinned to look like a PlayStation limited edition anyways. And so then you end up either giving fairly valueless swag to prove that it actually was one of the limited editions, or digital swag, which is completely useless. At a certain point, they should just be selling the base plates and the side plates and not trying to sell the whole console as a limited edition. Although that does also speak to what PlayStation is going to start trying to do, is just that they're clearly going to try and gouge you for the PlayStation 5 Pro, and they're clearly going to try and gouge you with collectible limited editions. This is all a very familiar Japanese style of selling products, in that they are expecting to make more money on fewer people, and they really don't care about the people who aren't super hardcore fans and that are actually going to be more critical of their consuming choices. Meanwhile, that is echoed by the deafening silence of just no new games, no tentpole single player games being announced, and at best you're getting remasters. Moving on, Tinkertown is coming to the Xbox Series and Xbox One on October 17th, and then the Switch in November. It's currently available on PC. Toho Spell Carnival launches November 19th in the West. think that might be a card game. It says turn-based RPG, JRPG. Interesting. G.I. Joe Wrath of Cobra launches September 26th for PC and then later for the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series and the Switch. Which, why is that not just all consoles at that point? A dark fantasy otome visual novel called The Red Bell's Lament has been announced for Switch. Otome meaning it's targeting young girls, young maidens, is what otome translates literally to from Japanese. The side-scrolling action platformer Bionic Bay adds a PlayStation 5 version. Heaven Dust and Heaven Dust 2 are now available for the PS4. It's a survival horror duology. I was hoping for more screenshots there. Let's see. See if we can look at the Steam page. This came out in 2000. It doesn't look like there's really no reason why it shouldn't be on my wish list other than I probably just had it on my wish list at some point and took it off because of the kind of low polygon blockiness to it. Then Heaven Dust 2 here. Also rated very positively a couple of years later. That's a kind of a great example of a game though that was on PC for years, 4 years before it's making its way to the PS4. It's quite a delay, although I'm not sure too many people were really waiting with bated breath. See, Death Comes True is now available for PS5. It's an unannounced port 4 years after the initial release. Was this on PC? Yes, it was. So yeah. Live action choose your own adventure game. Once again, 4 years ago. Let's see, a game called, I want to say Cabaret, but I guess that's Cabernet, launches October 24th. 19th century Europe inspired 2D narrative RPG. Interesting. It still is very much just a wide difference from games that put out press releases and announce themselves on Steam. I mean on Gematsu. And then just random games that just list themselves on Gematsu. Sorry We're Closed launches November 14th. Let's see if we have that on the follow list. This definitely looks weird. You can see this being quite something that's well received. This is the kind of game in particular you would think content creators would go out of their way to find and cover, as there's just been this drought of anything else to cover and play, and I probably am not following the right content creators in general, but also just don't see people covering games. And it is very much catch-22 as far as my YouTube subscriptions go, in that I find a lot of mainstream video game journalists to be unrelatable, in that they just don't talk about games, or the way they talk about games just doesn't feel like they're actually the same kind of gamer I am. And then smaller content creators I just really haven't found to subscribe to. Now, YouTube has announced a whole bunch of what I think is probably mostly nonsense that they're adding to YouTube, but one of the things is the ability to hype smaller channels 3 times per month. And with that hype feature, they're going to create a newer list to once again try and promote smaller content creators. And we'll see how well that really works. So it probably would be very helpful if once that feature comes out, everybody hypes my channel as possible. I would make a very selfish argument here to say that my content and my channel in particular needs to be shoved into the faces of so many people, because I know only a fraction of those people are actually going to be interested in my style of content. So because I'm just not making content designed to be have a mass appeal anyways, so extra hypes like that could be very helpful and useful. Of course, in direct contrast to YouTube announcing a bunch of new features, there is also a case where reaction channels are still a big deal, and that it's getting talked about more on Reddit, at least, where original content creators are able to make a video and only get a few thousand views before people with millions of subscribers just do a low effort reaction video to the original content creator's video and get millions of views. Which, yeah, there's really not been a solution for what used to be called freebooting videos, which is really what a lot of big reaction channels are doing, is that they're just freebooting videos and stealing content and adding not enough content of their own to justify fair use. Like sitting in a corner and just going wow every now and then is really not adding enough content to call it fair use. It just isn't. That's never what fair use was supposed to be. You're incredibly overvaluing your reactions and your wow, so cool. Even recapping what was just shown or said is generally not creative enough for fair use arguments. And I'm a big proponent of fair use, but you have to be realistic too. You have to actually substantially add your own element to it, your own creativity to it. Moving on, I went from having no Gamatsu headlines to having a ton, obviously. Rain World DLC The Watcher launches March 28th, 2025. Monospaced Lovers launches October 31st for the PS5, Switch, and PC. It's a side-scrolling platformer. Let's see if we can see what this is. Interesting. While it is a side-scrolling platformer, the main protagonist and the narrative that seems to be being told seems to be much more romance-centric, which is something we just don't get a lot of. And I would like to see more games like that succeed. Doesn't happen very often. A Devil May Cry animated series premieres April 25th with a teaser trailer. It's for Netflix. There's been no indication whatsoever, though, that this would lead to any increased likelihood of a new Devil May Cry game or anything like that. Let's see. Sony Interactive Entertainment announced its full Tokyo Game Show lineup schedule. Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake and Metaphor ReFantasio and more. There's a whole list here on Gamatsu you can check out. Let's see. Blackfinger Jet co-developer has been co-developed by Acquire. New trailer to premiere at the Tokyo Game Show. Yeah, the lack of new Japanese games might be because they're holding back for the Tokyo Game Show. I'm not sure when the Tokyo Game Show actually happens. It's September 26th, so in about a week it would make a lot of sense for there to be less Japanese announcements. Shino Nome Abyss, the Maiden Exorcist, adds a Switch version. Let's see. River City Saga, Three Kingdoms, next game introduction trailer is available. It's a long list, long title. They are still just constantly trying to bring back enthusiasm around the original River City characters to some level. The River City guys, and instead of just fully admitting that the way forward developed River City Girls was way more interesting and popularly received way more in the West, at least. I mean, this is pretty much just a direct, let's see if we can do River City Girls ourselves, but focus on the East and traditional Japanese/Chinese outfits. Although it's not that traditional, he's still driving around with a motorcycle. Let's see. Glaciered story trailer details and screenshots are going to be playable at the Tokyo Game Show. It's been a while since we've seen anything from Glaciered. This idea that you would be swimming in this frozen over ocean as this kind of weird alien-like character, and effectively you're flying in the water. You look like a bird, you fly around like a bird. You're just supposed to be in the water. I suppose the idea is this might be an attempt at doing something like Echo the Dolphin. Although even in that case, Echo the Dolphin's most interesting components were often that it was jumping out of the water. And if the ocean is actually completely frozen over, you can't do that. Good Smile Company and Front Wing have announced a visual novel called Kanade for PC. Still getting visual novels announced, still fairly popular. Although with new visual novels, we could start to get a feeling of what the animation to the animation style of the week is, as far as just how they're going to draw things and how animators are drawing things these days. Let's say this is falling into the kawaii anime style, but still, even in that, the head is actually fairly larger than you would have in a kawaii style. Atelier Ryza series 5th anniversary optimization updates are now available with new quality of life features, which, that in particular may make a great argument to play Atelier Ryza now if you haven't played it before, and that they've just added autosave and a very easy difficulty for the latter two titles. And certainly I could see why I personally might want to play the Atlas Ryzen series on easy, just because I know it's going to be a JRPG. I know it's going to be time consuming. So anything that just removes a little bit of friction and makes the experience a little bit faster, a little bit smoother, is ideally what I would want. Because certainly I would be coming to Atlas Ryzen with less than a huge desire for JRPG gameplay, which may be a mistake, certainly going into any JRPG and not having a deep level of love and want for the JRPG grindiness that tends to exist in JRPGs. Let's see, Crossbow Blood Knight is coming to the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series on September 27th. It's currently available for the Switch and PC. Don't recognize this. It sounds almost like a VR game. This is yet another game that came out in 2000. So we are weirdly seeing this pattern. Seems like from different companies just porting their PC first games to consoles for some secondary sales. Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii has been announced for PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and PC. I would assume that this is a standalone parody game and not just DLC. And it seems a little silly, but it's not the silliest of things to do. Although this might very well point to the limitations of making a Yakuza game and then having all the main protagonists be males because they're Yakuza. And there's just a general sexism in Yakuza. Let's see, Sword Art Online Fractured Daydream system trailer is available if you want to look at that on Gamatsu. And then Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm is coming to iOS and Android on September 25th, which I feel like something called Ultimate Ninja Storm. Yeah, it's been around since 2008 on the PS3. So this is them porting a very old game to iOS and Android, which inherently I think that maybe the better trend that we start to see is that we would just see older games being emulated to cell phones, but console games being just better experiences. The thing I would run into, I think you're going to run into a problem here though, is that you're just assuming that there's a whole new generation and a whole new audience here. So Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm seems like it's only telling the story of Naruto, the original Naruto anime, not any of the continuations or movies of Naruto, which they are an entire generation ahead now as far as where Naruto went. Yeah. Weirdly, it also needs to be pointed out that they are asking $10 for this game, and that is kind of crazy. I guess it's nice that it isn't just full of microtransactions instead, but this is really another example of a game that should be free and should be used as a form of advertising Naruto in general to create a new fandom. Where do you get that new fandom to monetize? That's the difficult question. You probably try to get them to sign up to Crunchyroll and pay monthly subscriptions to watch anime that way. Or you probably try to sell them Naruto DVDs or Blu-rays in Japan in particular at a high price. But yeah, $10 is way too much to charge for any mobile game, so I don't think that's gonna work. And then Slitterhead details rarities, characters, skills, and Kowloon Slums stage. Let's see if we can look at the screenshots fairly quickly and then move forward. This game Slitterhead could turn out to be something very interesting, but it does have that danger, like a lot of Japanese horror based experiences, in that it might just wear out its welcome with too many updates and too much hyping before the game actually comes out, or it might just have the perfect amount of hyping and then the game comes out and it's just not well received anyways. Definitely seems to me like a lot of the fighting in these screenshots are being done just in empty voids. I guess there's going to be some stealth missions also. I wouldn't be surprised if this game plays a lot more like a open world game than it probably should. Okay. With that, I have now finally, 2 hours in, gotten the Gamatsu articles where I want them. So now we will look at all the new games on Steam, and then we will be done. Yep. Moving kind of slow today, certainly. We will give things a chance to make more YouTube shorts. I suspect that my other program, Macro, that schedules videos, including YouTube shorts, might be a little bit off, because it does seem like since I have been scheduling YouTube shorts, they have been doubling up at weird times and coming out at weird times, where ideally I want them to come out late in the evening, although right now there's no real reason to do it that way. In the long run, there will be, once I start airing pre-recorded footage. Again, I want the pre-recorded footage and the live streams to get notifications coming out, not notifications for YouTube shorts coming out. And frankly, maybe I'm not getting YouTube notifications for YouTube shorts at all. Broken Sword Shadows of the Templars Reforged is out, and we can see it's 100% positive with 52 user reviews. There was concerns that they were going to use AI to upscale and just generate images on the art edge that would not have been there, so that this could be played at 4K. Seems like those concerns have not really led to anything, though. So then you really just are getting to an argument about, do you want to double dip if you've already purchased this game, or if you've purchased it fairly recently. It is also questionable whether Revolution Software is capable of making a new Broken Sword game or a new game at all, and whether they are just very much going to constantly be stuck in reselling the same games. And that's not going to work. Broken Sword 2 might sell if it was remastered fairly well, but once you start getting into Broken Sword 3 and 4, some of those games are 3D CGI games. You're going to have to start over completely from scratch, and those stories are not particularly good. The balance in the story and the relationship story between Nico and George was never any better than it was in the first game, and it just gets weirder and more irritating with every game. So I think you might loosely make a remake of the second game, but by the time you're at the third game, you probably should think of something completely different. Yeah. And there's definitely more work that can be done to polish some of the later Broken Sword games. The funny thing I would say about point and click adventures too is that if somebody does make a new point and click adventure game, it's just not going to have the hype around it to get people to play it in early days, which creates this situation where the only good new point and click adventure games are going to end up being barely reviewed and barely played, and it's going to take some deep divers to take the risk on new point and click adventure games to potentially even spread the word that a game is worth it, or some deep sells or giveaways of the game to spread the word. And inherently that's true for all of these Steam games, is that Valve probably, this is an insane price. Yeah, Valve, first of all, should probably limit the maximum price you can set a game for below $100. $99.99 seems like more than fair as far as the maximum price you can set your game at. Although they may get in legal trouble if they did that, but specifically through the Steam Direct program. But with that, there should also just be a beta testing option where people can sign up, maybe even pay a monthly fee to get random games given to them to play for free, and in the hopes that they get reviewed. It's a shame that effectively game developers need to bribe people to write reviews for their games, but that's really the case. And it's kind of the case with most products, is that to get somebody to spend their time to review anything, you effectively need to bribe them. Which I guess points out that if I ever got back to one of my physical projects that I've backburnered, just massive amounts of project debt, just starting things and not finishing it. But if I ever did get back to that, probably should give away some free units to some people for reviews. Which, yeah, that's certainly a dangerous but time-proven way of doing things. This is yet another Toho game. One of the things I've bought since I'm sitting here and just going through all these games is new window shades with adapters to make them Zigbee controlled via the Tuya smart home infrastructure. I haven't done Zigbee as far as the many smart devices I've had. They've all been 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. Fast Penguin not being received as well as I had hoped. Zigbee and Z-Wave. I think Z-Wave is pretty dead here. Actually, I might be saying the wrong one, and it might actually be Z-Wave. But yeah, they are not as good as the newer standard of Thread in my belief, but Thread is not really being adapted as much as I would have liked, and frankly, the Matter standard is being adopted very slowly, to the point where I'm not sure it's actually going to stay around and succeed. I wouldn't be surprised if they just come up with yet another standard. But yeah, Z-Wave and Zigbee are, I believe, lower frequencies, less likely to interfere. Lower bandwidth also because they're lower frequencies, but not necessarily needed when you're just telling a roller shade to go up and down. And with these smart shade rollers comes Zigbee adapters to connect them to a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi router, and with that it does open up the door that at some point in the distant future I could maybe replace some of my smart bulbs with Zigbee bulbs. And if I replace the Zigbee bulbs, I have a lot of if I replace my 2.4 gigahertz bulbs with Zigbee bulbs, that would reduce the number of devices connecting to my Wi-Fi router and improve my network connectivity and speed by a decent amount. So yeah, of course that's not really advisable what I'm doing here right now. It would be much more advisable if there was a Thread substandard that was connecting to Tuya to control roller shades, Thread motors. But I don't think there is. I didn't see any, and I didn't look very hard. Like, ideally everything should be Thread. We're seeing a lot of Super Autopets clones come out these days. Not sure why. Maybe I should give them a chance, but I didn't. Seems like we might start to see more escape rooms that are 3D designed. There's something to that idea that maybe would work. Yeah. I have just constantly added more and more smart devices and got more and more things automated. And at a certain point, if I all had it on Home Assistant, it might run faster. There is a 30-second delay pretty much on Tuya's cloud platform. That's one of the things specifically about the Thread connectivity protocol, though, is that it's supposed to be super fast, so you press a light switch and a light bulb wirelessly turns on instantaneously, or within a second at least, whereas it's several noticeable seconds when you do that over Wi-Fi. But I'm not really regretting any of my purchasing decisions as far as the smart devices I picked. Some of the smart outlets now would have been better if they had monitoring built in, so you knew how much power the device plugged into it. Some of the smart outlets are a little too big and take up 2 slots instead of 1, and could be replaced in at least one place with one smart power strip instead of multiple smart outlets. But yeah, some of the technology might be better now than it once was. Here's an example of a game I couldn't have curated because the tags don't say anything offensive. Even though it is clearly an asset flip. Okay, I think we've gone full circle on that. Yep. One of the things I guess I would say is that in retrospect, buying color changing light bulbs has been very less useful. I don't change the colors, whereas, well, let me rephrase that. Buying RGB light LED bulbs, smart bulbs, was not useful. You do want color temperature changing light bulbs. You want to be able to go somewhere between 3000 Kelvin to 6500 Kelvin or brighter on the brightness, but being able to make it red, being able to make it green, blue, or some combination of those 3 colors, it's just not that useful. Like, I had one programming at one time that would turn the light bulbs red for like a red alert, and that's the only time I'd really use it. Yes, you can do some crazy techno rave color changing based on music and things like that, but it's not like the bulbs are particularly synchronized over Wi-Fi so that they would change at the same time. So you probably can save some money with just white individual smart LED bulbs that can change the temperature. Color changing to me only makes sense if you're going to do a strip of individually controllable LEDs for celebrations, so you can have like Christmas lights and or red, white, and blue United States lights during certain celebrations. That's about it. And then even those patterns, you have to be able to program them, and I don't think the 2U infrastructure is actually really great for doing that. Anyways, I'm not talking about video game news at this point, so let's... Why did all of my things combine? I don't know. That's going to be it for this stream. It's been a slow, laid-back one, certainly. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.